Hi everybody, I'm Jack the Rambling American Turn. Welcome to Augustusalong. It is July 31st here in Arizona, the night of July 31st, but I think most people will be seeing this on August 1st or sometime in August of 2020. So thank you to everybody who reached out about joining in on a monthly read-along of the 12 Caesars by Suetonius. I'm excited. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. I've never done a read-along where I make videos, but I'm really excited. At any time, comment. We can figure out ways to connect as people have questions or thoughts that you'd like to share. I've read this book a number of times in my life, over a couple of different decades in my life. Even when I was younger, I thought it was a really strange, fascinating, fun book to read. Although we're going to see plenty of tragedy in this book. We're going to see plenty of horror. There will be some scenes that are not for the faint-hearted. But there's also, Suetonius has a very sly eye for biography, for anecdote, for history, and we're going to see that come through in some really fun ways, I hope, over the course of this month. So I wanted to do a quick introduction. So I put a schedule that next Saturday we'll have I'll do a video around the first two chapters, Julius Caesar and Augustus, and then we'll go on from there. But I want to do a quick introduction. Who's Suetonius? What's going on when he's writing, and what's going on right before the biography of Julius Caesar kicks off. Just fill in some context, a lot of maybe questions that modern readers would have approaching any text, any nonfiction text, but particularly one from the classical world. The 12 Caesars is almost exactly 1900 years old at this point. So let's jump in. Who's Suetonius? Well, he's from the Roman middle class, upper middle class. He's not of the senatorial class, but his family's comfortable enough that he doesn't have to go do menial labor, and he's well educated. He is part of the Roman bureaucracy, so he never rises to the rank of being a governor, or he's never going to be given command of a legion, anything like that. But he does rub shoulders with that upper class, with the highest echelons of society. He seems to have been fairly close to Pliny the Younger, who was a governor, who had, quite a fair amount of power in that era, and wrote a wealth of letters that we have. I think my copy's right here. And he then rises, in fact, to truly rub shoulders with, the highest of the high. He's the imperial secretary to the Emperor Hadrian in the 110s CE. And because of that means he has access to the imperial archives. He has access to primary and secondary sources that are long lost to us, and he reads them. He's curious. He writes plenty of biographies, not just of the Caesars, but of others. We have some extant biographies of his around Virgil, and I believe a little bit around Lucan. And so he's writing these biographies. And he appears to have started the 12 Caesars before he lost his post as imperial secretary. We're not entirely sure why. The Augustan history, which is after this book and sort of modeled on this book, puts in a little aside that Suetonius, an imperial prefect who was equally high-ranking, a couple of other people lost their posts under the Emperor Hadrian. And it had something to do with being discourteous or interacting with Empress Sabina without Hadrian's permission. Hadrian did not have a romantic relationship with Sabina. Hadrian was not romantically interested in her at all. He was very much in love with a young man named Antinous. So it's unclear, was Suetonius fired for having an affair with the emperor's wife? Who knows? He may have even come back into power, because one of his later works might talk a little bit about civil service and duty 10 years later. But anyways, he loses access to the imperial archives, but he'd read a lot. And these are biographies, not histories. Tacitus, in the generation before, had very much written histories. He'd written a series of histories and then a series of annals, some of which has survived, a fair amount of which has survived. Suetonius is not going to write histories. He's not going to follow chronological order. And unlike Tacitus, he's not looking at history or biography to teach us lessons. He doesn't want us to look at the lives of great men or powerful but terrible men and then learn a bunch of lessons. Tacitus very much does. Tacitus picks a side. Suetonius is more just here to tell you some really good stories. some really interesting stories. So when he writes, he opens the chapters with, and I apologize, Julius Caesar, the very beginning, is missing from the manuscripts, so we don't have it. But with the later ones, what you'll see is he opens with, who is this emperor's family? Like, where does this guy come from? Who are his parents, grandparents, and such? A little bit around, what was his youth like? How did this person become emperor? And then he just goes on, here are some different stories around this part of this person's life throughout the person's whole life. Here are some stories around, here's this personality trait this person had. Well, here's all the different times in that person's life you see it. And so it reads like an unconventional biography, but it can be fun to sort of dwell around that way. And you'll notice that it's not strictly chronological. I, again, am using the Robert Graves translation that's been revised by Michael Grant. It's still mostly the Robert Graves translation, and I find it very readable. So that's Suetonius. That's who he was. That's what's going on when he's writing. So what the heck was going on in Rome and Italy before Julius Caesar? Because from Julius Caesar on, the biographies sort of give us a context for the next emperor, like his time. We get that from the previous biography or from two previous biographies, particularly when, you know, 5 of these are members of a Julio-Claudian dynasty where they know each other, like legitimately know each other. Plus there's Julius Caesar. And then later on we have the Flavian dynasty, which is Vespasian and his 2 sons. So they very much know each other. Their biographies fill in plenty of context for the later books. But what's going on before Julius Caesar? Well, Julius Caesar famously never is proclaimed an emperor within his own lifetime, never takes that title, but is more adopts a dictator title. And then does some other stuff that upsets some people, and they take action. But in the era before Julius Caesar, Rome did not have a pleasant first century BC or BCE. There's a whole series of civil wars. I had to write some down because I knew I would forget one if I didn't. So there's this whole series of civil wars that run across the first century BC. We start at the very top of the century, about 100 years, in. We've got what are called the social wars. And so Rome had not given Roman citizenship to all of the different Italian regions who were considered like allied lands and allied people. They didn't have Roman citizenship, which meant that they were very much excluded. There was a whole civil war fought around that. Rome won the civil war, but gave that Roman citizenship to the Italian allies. Moving on from there, we get a pair of civil wars where Sulla goes and truly legitimately marches on Rome in fury, and they're prepared to just see heads roll. There's a series of pogroms that a whole group of senators are concerned that they're all going to be executed, and that doesn't totally happen. But Caesar is a young man when the civil wars between Sulla and Marius occur, and he kind of stands his ground on a principle. He takes off and kind of goes into hiding. Sulla later just decides he's tired of being a dictator and leaves and then dies. After that, about a decade after that, then we have the famous Spartacus War. It's really the third mass slave revolt that Rome had experienced. And if Spartacus is one of the gladiators who's a large part of it, that civil war in part is put down. Caesar again is about 10 years older, so he's still in Rome kind of considered a younger man, but he's very much a man at that point and an adult. And none of this is really in the Suetonius life of Julius Caesar. So in the Spartacus War, the two people who later become political allies, secret political allies of Caesar a little bit later in his career, Marcus Licinius Crassus and Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, or Pompey the Great, they team up to sort of end the slave revolt that Spartacus and other gladiators have been leading, and are successful with that and receive many rewards. Caesar later forms a triumvirate with the two of them. And then finally, about 10 years after that, while Cicero was consul, I believe he was consul at the time, Catiline has a conspiracy. And so there's been a whole series of civil wars, rebellions, revolts, slave revolts. This has been going on pretty much clockwork, every 10 years, there's a civil war in Rome, as we see that the Republic that started in a town and spread out to a region of Italy and then all of Italy and picked up Sicily and Spain and North Africa and later on Macedonia and Greece in that area, the Republic has reached its stretching point, its breaking point. And Caesar is very much in a position of command when that happens, and that sort of takes us into the life of Julius Caesar by the Roman historian biographer Suetonius. And I hope that's enough context, is that Caesar is very much stepping into, there have been almost 50 years of regular, consistent civil wars. That is it's not anarchy, but that's the very unstable government and very unstable society that Caesar has been rising through and is now about to step on center stage in. So I hope everybody has a safe weekend. We'll read Julius Caesar and Augustus this week, and on August 8th I'll put up a video. And maybe for that one I'll wear a toga. I don't know. See you, bye.